Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to come to this webinar that would allow us to discuss really what the new Trump administration means for Africa in terms of trade. But before we start, so Mr. Leon, I was actually hoping that you would take 5 minutes and just give us a brief introduction to what is the Africa Liberty Network, why have we been formed, why are we coming together, and also what our objectives are for the medium term and the long term. And after the opening remarks, we're going to begin properly.
All right, thank you very much, Henry. Good day, everyone. Most of you know me. My name is Leonard Ogunwaide. Currently, the Director of Western Relations at Face of Liberty International and the founder president at Africa Liberty Network. The ALN, Africa Liberty Network, as it tends to call it, it's designed for just one thing and one thing only: coalition of all the libertarian think tanks in Africa. CEPI, Henry is the lead founder of CEPI in Cameroon, and we have other people in other places all around. We have our friend in Aled in Uganda. We have liberalists here in Nigeria, and a bunch of other people all around doing different things that everybody is doing. But how good will it be if we can actually do something different? If we can actually do something different and bringing everybody together so that we know what CEPI is doing in Cameroon, CEPI knows what Face of Liberty is doing in Nigeria, we know what African Liberty and Economic Development in Uganda is doing, and we know what Eastern Caucasus in Zimbabwe is doing, know what is happening in DRC without looking at the news, like really what is happening on the ground. And that is the main reason why we started this, just basically, as you can see on your screen right now, to advance liberty and prosperity across Africa, but not just by one person, but all the people coming together. Yeah, so at the founding of this great mindset, we have 22 founding organizations across 7 African countries. We are still growing, but these are the founding members. As you can see, Face of Liberty is Nigeria, Afodi is Uganda, Mal is Malawi, Mutindo is Uganda, this is Liberalists from Nigeria, Eastern Caucasus EF from Zimbabwe, Olent EF from South Sudan, Free Future is from Nigeria, this is CEPI, that Henry Kwam actually is the founder. We have Aled from Uganda, we have Asei from Ghana, and we have the Ladies for Economic Development in Ghana. So currently we have 12 founding organizations from 7 countries across Africa. So to the free market fellows on this platform, when I was on the orientation, I told you guys, your job, the final product of your capstone project, have the opportunity to go wide around Africa. And this is what I'm talking about. Just imagine you finish your capstone project, maybe it's a policy recommendation or an opinion editorial, and you have it published on at least 3, 4, 5 of this website around Africa. Your name is flying around. You never can tell who's going to see it, and they're going to reach out to you for bigger opportunities. So the idea, think of it as the velocity space of the libertarian world. And we know we are going to get there because we start strong and we have people with the right mindset working with us on this. So that's basically what we are trying to achieve with ALN. And thank you for joining us on this movement. Back to you, Eric. You're muted. You are muted, Henry.
Oh, right. Thank you very much, Leon. I think you've given us a very good overview. So today we want to get to the crux of things. I think most of us are aware that this executive roundtable is really for us to find out how we can turn tariffs into triumphs, because Africa is one of the continents that has been hit by tariffs from the United States. So the United States has imposed a 10% blanket tariff on all countries, and it's also imposed 25% tariffs on auto products and auto parts. So what we want to try and do today is what we're doing today is first, we should try, I would like for each and every one of us to share what the impact, what the possible impact is on our economies. Secondly, what steps our economies have taken to mitigate the impact of these tariffs. And if our countries haven't taken any impact, what are the strategies and recommendations that we must put into place to ensure that our countries become much more resilient? Why is the Africa Liberty Network doing this? Because some countries have been hit by tariffs, but they're still competitive. The way Vietnam will be hit, or the way the Nordic countries like, say, Sweden will be hit, are different from the way Nigeria and Cameroon and Ghana and Sudan will be hit. Why? Simply because some countries have prepared for this long before. What some of these countries did is 10 or 20 years ago, they set up manufacturing in different continents, including North America, to ensure that if one country ever becomes a bit more populist, they can produce and escape these tariffs. These are things which countries taught 20, 30, 40 years ago. So today, this is an opportunity for us to really set the foundations to begin thinking in that light. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time really to be here. And I think we're going to go one at a time. We have a few people represented by some institutions. So if we call your name and your institution has already spoken, then we'll move to the next person. But the first thing is, what will US tariffs really mean for African economies? Not in terms of GDP growth, but in terms of employment, in terms of incomes, and in terms of the competitiveness of our local businesses. So who would like to go first? In order for us to go a bit more efficiently, I think whoever wants to speak first, just put your hand up and then you have the floor. Let's try and make it as seamless as possible. Okay, so maybe someone should like get us started. So I'm going to start for Cameroon. Okay, yes, Leonard, you have the floor.
Okay, this is what I'm thinking, yeah? So, please let me turn on my camera. Okay, so this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking US tariff for African economy would, there are two things, yeah, but I'm going to take one and hopefully someone else think of the second one. And if nobody talk about it, then basically maybe I might come back to say the other one. I'm thinking employment. And how do I mean employment? You see, high tariff will reduce demand for African exports. Textiles, our metals, our coffee, our whatever thing that we export from Africa. And what would that lead to? When people are not demanding for what we need anymore, what happens? People will be laid off their jobs, especially in labor-intensive sectors. That's one first thing that comes to my head when I first hear the word trade war, as it were, or sometimes we call it the trade pressure. It will lead to a big time unemployment in labor-intensive sector. And apart from that, export-oriented SMEs, they are really, really vulnerable. Because at the end of the day, now that the sectors are not actually working anymore, the next thing is the SMEs working in that sector too will not have anything to do to work again. So with this, there will be a lot of overload on people and on the economy as well. Everything will become expensive because nothing to do, no employment and no money in circulation, and it's a real problem for us. So I'll let other person pick your other points.
All right, thank you so much, Leon, for that. So yes, Leon has showed that employment will be impacted because when our firms export, they have to employ people to produce the textiles, to produce the cocoa, the coffee, the beauty products, whatever. And so that would immediately cause them to reduce their employment. And for our SME-facing sectors, it's also going to increase the costs of them exporting to those markets, so their products become less competitive. Mr. Masudi Haji, you have the floor.
Yes, good evening. Good evening to you. My name is Kanso Masud Haj from Uganda. Among the impacts of tariffs on African continent is that there is increased costs. In this way, high tariffs on imported goods from the US, such as machinery, vehicle, and electronics, could lead to increased production costs and inflationary pressure in African countries. So, because of high tariffs, African countries actually they cannot go like high depending on imported goods from US because of them being heavily taxed. Yeah.
Okay. So again, yes, tariffs increase the price, the cost of our goods in other countries, and so it just makes them less competitive. If we look at but you know that the United States, the reason why it is true that Africa has lower tariffs than the US, that's true. On average, our tariffs range from 15% up to 33 to 40%. Yes. But the reason that is because initially when African countries went to WTO, we told at the WTO, we keep telling them that African countries need time to adapt. Because if we reduce all of our tariffs and allow all US products to come in, then our own local producers would have no market, not in the agricultural sector, even for milk, not in the beauty sector where people are importing from the UAE, from the United States, from Europe, not even for second-hand clothes we're importing from Turkey. So, and in some ways, the reason why it's not like Africa was treating the US unfairly. No, the US has been the leader of the free world because the US has always been committed to Africa's development. And so, this is why, even up to the African Growth and Opportunity Act, immediately it came into force, you saw that countries like Kenya, like Ghana, like South Africa were exporting a lot under the agreement. And that's because it allowed African countries to access these markets much simpler, in much quicker ways. Look at a country like South Africa, which is exporting, which has auto exports, for example. The only reason they can be competitive in the United States is because they've brought the cost of tariffs down. And so this will really impact our businesses. Does someone else want to give us a few points about how tariffs will impact our economies locally? Thank you for your points, Mr. Leon and Mr. Masudiaji. Okay.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else want to, if you have even a concrete example of where you are, that would be really, really beneficial. In some ways, the way in most of our African exports that most of our exports are raw materials. So cocoa, coffee, banana, rubber. That's what we mostly export to this, and also crude oil. That's what we mostly export to these advanced economies. So on the one hand, we're facing double risks because even when we export to these countries, most of the trade is invoiced in dollars. And this is the reason why it's so when you hear our central banks worrying, oh, we only have 4 months worth of import cover. We only have foreign exchange worth 4 months of our imports or 5 months of our imports. It's because a lot of our systems are already dollarized. We cannot even between ourselves. It's now that we have the Pan-African payment system where we're going to start. If I buy a car from Nigeria, or if I buy a shirt from Nigeria or a gandura from Nigeria, I'm going to pay in the nairas, and vice versa, they pay in the franc CFA. It's now that we're having this Pan-African payment system. But ultimately, our economies are so dollarized because we use the 80% of our of trade in Africa is cleared in dollars. And so that puts a double disadvantage on our local businesses. Does anybody else want to tell us maybe how it's impacting their local business? In Lesotho, Mr. Leonard spoke about textile. 85% of Lesotho's income comes from exports to the United States and other countries. Lesotho relies on exports of textile products. And so their finance minister was saying, after the tariffs were imposed, was saying that about up to 20% of jobs could be impacted by US tariffs alone. And so it's a real risk for our economies, because sometimes when we talk about tariffs, we're talking about it in ways in ways that we don't really see it. But if we start thinking about how our businesses in different sectors are impacted, I think our recommendations would then make sense. So, does anybody else want to take the floor? You can raise your hand, and you have the floor. Yes, Mr. Leonard.
Yeah. Another thing that I'm thinking is still in the aspect of the export thing here, but when we're talking about competition, when this tariff is imposed and it affects African markets, African products becomes more expensive in outside market, especially in the US. Because now, let's say it's a US trade war against the world, US against the world. Something that is being sold for $50 before. No, but now the tariff is on it and it has to go all the way to $75. And the next thing is someone is building the same thing or doing the same thing in the US and is selling for $60. How? So there is no opportunity for competition again for us, because now, because of the tariff imposed on African products or any other the other country against that is not US-based market, then we have a problem. So this trade war, this trade pressure by the current president of the US is doing a whole lot of harm, actually. But it is mostly for export goods, in my own opinion. If you're selling within the country, you are fine. But to a larger extent, you will call you a subsistence trader, like subsistence farmer. Everybody wants to go global. Everybody wants to go global. But now the tariff is too much for you to compete outside there in a favorable way, or else you have to go run at a loss. Or you find enough money to go and set up your business in that country, which is extremely expensive. Because now you are coming in to set up your company or your product as a foreign resident. I know what it takes for you to register as a foreign resident here in Nigeria. And I have a bit of clue of what it takes for you to register as a foreign resident in the UK. I don't really know about the US registration process. But it is not the same thing as you being a citizen of that country. So you don't have the power for competition to set up the company right there in the base of the main thing. Is you have to break the bank. It's just crazy. And I hope to find a way forward for Africa as we go on the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leon. So yes, I mean it's a no-brainer. Not every African business even has the money to invest or even set up operations in the US or the UK or Europe. Many businesses just don't have that kind of have those kind of funds. So we're going to take Mr. Nyasha Freeman, and after that, Mr. Saka. Mr. Nyasha, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, my brother Henri. So, concerning, I want also to directly put my input on my brother Leon's remarks. I was, surfing around the internet this past week, and I realized that when African countries, we were busy stampeding in order to please Almighty Trump, Vietnam, of all the places, was busy not retaliating to the taxation and also the tariff system of the US, but it was busy scouting for new markets. And within that scouting, it was now looking at the competitive advantage of its products in other new markets, and also diversifying its entry into the new markets. And up to now, the articles I've been going through have been mentioning that they've managed to find 3 new markets that is cutting down on the tariffs that has been put on their products by the US. But as for us, for Africa, we have the Africa Continental Free Trade. We can utilize that at continental level to ensure that before we look beyond Africa, what can we trade as member states of the African Union here locally? You know, I want to give you an example. Like Nigeria does produce lots of oil products, whilst the Southern African countries, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, produce lots of grain. And we have 225 plus million mouths to feed in Nigeria. But you find out that, the Southern African nations are making pacts and concessions with Middle Eastern countries for oil products and petroleum products. Whilst Nigeria, Angola, Equatorial Guinea have vast reserves of this, resource. So charity should begin at home before we are, starting to get worried about Mr. Trump and his tariff regime. We need to look upon ourselves. What can we do as an African continent? What's in it for us when we are speaking or we are promoting the Africa Continental Free Trade? Let's not take this as a subject to just debate, discuss, and also to shelve nicely within our counters. Let's be practical. Let's start to implement the Africa Continental Free Trade as a continent before we look beyond. Thank you, my brother.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Nyasha Freeman. You have a point. We have to trade. We have to look at trade at home. Why? Because if you look at other continents, in Europe, 65% of Europe's trade happens in the European Union. 45% of trade between North American countries happen within their region. In Africa, it's only 16 to 18% of our trade that happens between ourselves. So we are much more closer to Latin America, that's around 20%. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, why are we not trading within ourselves? Why is it difficult for African businesses to trade with each other? And the African Continental Free Trade Area is really an opportunity for us to not only react to what the US is doing, but also adjust and ensure that we become much more resilient. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Freeman. Someone had their hand raised. I forget who it was. Pardon me. Someone had their hand raised after Mr. Freeman. And so regarding the AfCFTA, yes, Mr. Saka Habib, you have the floor.
Okay, can you hear me, everyone?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you very well.
Mr. Linon has talked about about it all, but I'll just add up to his point. Normal, everything that have negative impact have positive impact, because impact can be negative or positive. Now, talking about the negative impact, tariff can increase normally. Tariff disrupt global trade or global economic, not only for Africa, but making very much on Africa. Tariff can lead to high cost for consumer and businesses. Now, high cost for customer and businesses. Now, there's many countries in Africa that are still living in poverty. Now, adding tariffs to their goods can increase their cost, making the level of poverty to hike. Like it can lead to high rate of poverty, because there are some countries that are still living in that there are some countries that are still living in poverty. That are still living in the they're not rich enough. They're not financially brilliant.
Well, I
So
mean, it's
increasing,
most of us. Yes,
yeah. So,
it's because there's still 600 million people in the continent that don't have access to electricity. So
so
it is really, really dire. And if depending on how you look at it, whether it's $1.20 or $2.25, a significant portion of the continent still lives below that every single day.
the tariff can cause inflation. So it can make them
Yes.
poor more. Then I will talk about I'll talk about the positive impact of it. Now, tariff to Africa. Like example, let me give my country, Nigeria. Now, when there is increase in tariff, it will challenge us to focus more on our products, oil. and export it, not even because talking from the reality. Nigeria now we base on oil, but still we have more import than export. So the tariff will give us it will open our eyes and challenge us to focus on export, what can produce like cocoa and others materials that we can try to we can try to export. So that's all I have for about tariff. But tariff it can lead to inflation, so the capital can lead to inflation, and it can also challenge us to focus more on our goals. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Habib. I think you've covered a few points there. Yes, it can be negative in that it raises costs for businesses and consumers, especially for the most vulnerable people in our societies. But it can also make us innovative because every crisis is an opportunity. If we remember when Russia launched its war in Ukraine, Cameroon was import about 40% of its fertilizer from Ukraine. And what happened? Immediately, Cameroonian farmers and agri organizations started importing fertilizers from Nigeria. Now, the only challenge is that it's been difficult for businesses to import fertilizers under the AfCFTA because a few months back when I checked, most businesses said that Nigeria hadn't submitted its tariff schedules yet. But now Nigeria has submitted its tariff schedules, which means that more African countries can look for the products which they were sourcing from elsewhere here in Africa. So I think that's a really good point. And also, it would force us to innovate because we've also grown very dependent to products from this US market and this European market. So these tariffs are really an opportunity for us to also think, where can businesses source their products locally and or regionally, and how can we help them reduce the cost of the tariffs that have been imposed. So before I give someone else the floor, I just wanted to point out that these tariffs they're going to have an impact on our societies because Lesotho, that was facing up to 50% tariffs, 12,000 people are going to be directly impacted. In South Africa, about 35,000 people are going to be impacted. Kenya, they've slapped a 10% tariff on clothes. Nigeria, South Africa, Ethiopia, Ghana, Cameroon, all of us have a 10% baseline tariff. So what we're talking about here is real jobs, and now it's we have to help. We as think tanks, we as free market advocates, as consultants, we have to make sure that when you meet a business, our job should not just to be to find an alternative supplier in Asia. We have to encourage more businesses to trade under the AfCFTA because after all, Africa is 1.2 billion people. We'll grow to 2.5 billion people by 2035, 2050. So we have to ensure that we begin leveraging our markets. And if we look at what the Chinese did, one Chinese diplomat has been saying it over and over again, that the reason why China was willing to go the distance is because China said they're going to make sure that their market becomes, their source of income for their businesses. Immediately, what the Chinese did is every single supermarket, they went and took businesses that were previously exporting to the US, they put them on supermarket shelves. They had exposition areas. These are some of the ways that they try to adapt as a country. So I think it's we as organizations, as consultants, we have to make sure that we're helping businesses see how they can replace whatever they were selling or buying from elsewhere, because I think it would also help us advance Africa more broadly. So does anyone else have another contribution? Any whatsoever. So I would like us to go to that's not the only question. So now, how can Africa build resilience against tariffs? We've spoken about the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is good. It would reduce tariffs on 90% of products. It opens a market of 1.2 billion people. The World Bank thinks incomes will grow up by $600 million. All of that is good. We at CEPI, we found that the AfCFTA alone can lift the GDP in African economies by 2.5%. All of that is good. But now, how can we make it a reality? Because so far, 75 to 80% of countries have ratified. Countries are now beginning to declare and publish their tariff schedules, which means that now, if a Cameroonian producer wants to import fertilizer from Nigeria, it would be much easier to do so under the AfCFTA because the people at the borders know exactly what tariff lines to apply to the different products that are traded between the continent. So I would like a few ideas. How can we really leverage the AfCFTA? Yes, Mr. Leonard, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. As you asked the question, yeah, I remember something I saw on Facebook some times ago. I hope this is not going to be infringement, copyright issue. By the way, you see this metal stone. This metal bar weighs 1 kg. That's 1,000 grams. If you can read it, it said this is a 1,000 gram iron bar. Its raw value is around $100. If you turn it to a shoe, it becomes $250. If you turn it to sewing machine, it goes to $70,000. If you decided to produce watch springs and gears, it goes to 6 million. And if you now decide to manufacture laser precision components out of it, it's worth 15 million. Then what actually caught my attention is your value is not just what you are made of, but above all, in what ways you can make best of who you are. And I can tell you for free, Africans are currently not making best use of who we are. How do I mean this? We kept exporting raw commodities, raw products. Going back to what we read the other time, the iron bar cost $100. But if you turn it to, you keep seeing how the price increases the more you turn into something useful. Instead of sending our cocoa bean raw to somewhere else for them to now bring it back for us, why can't we do the refinement here and sell the refined product to them? It's more money. Why will Uganda send the raw cotton out of Uganda to somewhere else in the Western world for it to be refined and sold back to Uganda where the cotton is made in the first place? Why we see that Nigeria always sell cocoa and Ghana always selling cocoa without it being refined? So I don't know what Cameroon has. Why does Kenya have to sell their raw tea without making sure that it is completely refined? We were in Kenya. I was in Kenya some few months ago, and what is the story is they said the tea is made in Kenya, but people that are selling telling us that this is just packaged in Kenya, not made in Kenya. And we all know Kenya is the father and mother of production of tea in Africa. Why does it need to go out? So we are sending what's supposed to make money for us, sending it out. Why can't we make the production, refinement, and everything done here? I think if we can do that, we will be able to build a bit of resilience against these future tariffs. Like you said, Vietnam is already trying to do what it needs to do. What is Africa going to do about it?
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that, Mr. Leon. So Mr. Leon has spoken about value added. We can no longer we have to ensure we're not just encouraging businesses who just produce things to sell. People have to transform. They have to add value because that is the basis of industrialization and economic transformation. So wherever we are, we should ensure that we're pushing our businesses to do more. And the examples he gave, you look at Vietnam, all of our phones that we're using, our laptops, our computers that we're using to attend this webinar today, it's not going to be possible without Vietnam. A small country that is off the coast of China. Most of the integrated circuits that we're using in here, they produce all of the chips. And so we have to ensure that we're pushing our economies and our businesses towards that direction. Mr. Masoud Diaji, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. The question of how can Africa dodge or avoid the US tariffs? One is by diversify export. In this way, diversify export. In this way, African countries can just can reduce dependence on a single market, that is US, by exploring alternative markets, going to China, European Union, and other emerging countries across the world.
Thank you very much for that. So yes, but you see, our worry for us at the Cameroon Economic Policy Institute is that we've been speaking about economic diversification for years. Africa is not short of reforms. So what we have to, I think what we have to try and do is, yes, we have to diversify our exports, but how? Because, for us to produce this pen in Africa, what would it take? For us to produce a laptop in Africa, what would it take? Economic diversifying exports is good, but I would like to challenge each and every one of us. If you take a sector like crude oil, Cameroon has crude oil, but we don't, we produce some Vaseline, but we don't produce the fuel that we use in cars. Why are we producing crude oil, exporting it to Germany, and then importing fuel from Germany and France to be used in cars? Yes, Mr. Leonard, you have the floor.
Yeah, speaking on diversifying, as I just mentioned, diversifying, it sparks something in my head. It can go in another way around too. And how do I mean? Must we do business with the US?
No, we mustn't. Our business with the US is only
Europe?
3%. Yes. And we must not do business with the Europe.
What happened within ourselves, as you mentioned it before? What happened to within ourselves? Why can't we do business with ourselves? But we all know the reason why we can't do business with ourselves. A whole lot of tariffs, bottlenecks, red tapes, and all of you. Now, thankfully, the AfCFTA is taking effect in some of the countries. There's a little win in Nigeria recently. There's a bit of implementation, and here and there, some like 3-4 countries have started ratifying and implementing the AfCFTA. But now, one thing that really makes my heart bitter is the fact that the people who are supposed to even understand, who, in quotes, leads this economy, does not even understand what AfCFTA is. It's that crazy.
Yes.
The contract where that would take care of African economy in the next decade. Even the people in power does not know that it exists. That's how crazy it is. So how do you want to implement this? I was talking to someone who is in the corridor of power some time ago, and they're like, oh, do you know that there is this policy that has been signed by 54 countries and since 2018, and we're still trying to, he said, which document is that? I said the AfCFTA. What he told me was, which one is the AfCFTA again? And this is someone in the corridor of power, someone who holds power. I won't mention it again. Someone who holds power. So how do you implement a change in the economic situation of a continent? Like, you not even go continent, in your country, when you don't even know what you're missing. And I think that is the main reason why this kind of roundtable discussions is going to go a long way. Because, man, must we trade with Africa? Must we trade with America? We can trade with Russia. No. We can trade with any other person.
Yes, with Europe, with Asia. I mean, I would like to remind each and every one of us here that the majority of Africa doesn't trade with the United States. 70% of African countries trade mostly with China. And when I say China is our largest trading partner, it's not saying 5% of our trade goes to China. No, in a country like Cameroon, 14% of our trade goes to China. The next person that comes in line, if you look at an economy like France, it's only 8% of our trade. So almost double. So what we have to also do is put this into perspective. What we've tried to do at CEPI is to make sure that we make Africans understand that, yes, they might impose tariffs, but our trade with the US is very minimal. It's not even up to 3% of the total trade. So we should also not overemphasize the United States because they're not even a larger market. What we have to also think about is China came to Africa and China did not sign any free trade agreement. But before we talk about the AfCFTA and what's in it, Miss Doris Olela, you have the floor. Ms. Doris Olela left a question. She said in the comments that Africa has strong endowments with critical minerals. Yes, we do. And rare earth minerals, from iron to uranium to bauxite to, whatever you can think of, we do have it. But unfortunately, can that be a huge bargaining chip for the continent? It can be, but unfortunately, if we're being realistic, we can no longer have resource control over the government because our governments have sold a lot of the resources away. I see Angela has joined us in Ghana. Issues of illegal mining began right in 2003, where they gave the Chinese a few licenses and they went and they exploited as much as they wanted. In Cameroon, it's the same thing in the eastern region. We give them a few licenses, they go and they exploit what they want. So we've given out a fair chunk of our resources already. And the new thing that we're beginning to do with China is that where you've got a site of iron ore, of uranium, or of rare earth metals, they go and take a loan from the Chinese and they say, come and build a plant there. You can exploit it and you give us this amount. And then whatever you do with the rest is not our problem. But the lack of governance is what is impacting, that our resource curse is essentially driven by a lack of governance. So what we have to do is tell governments that governments have to think of properly monetizing our resources. Because when you go and borrow $6 billion from China and you only create 600 jobs, it doesn't make sense. It means that for every job that $600 million, it means for every job that you've created in your local economy, 600 jobs for $600 million means $1 million to create one job. That's unacceptable. Mr. Jamo, you have the floor.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I think you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, my comment concerns the tariff imposed by Trump. And then I don't speak English very well. Sorry about that.
We
I
have
would
some
like
French people as well, but yes, go on.
Okay. Alors, mon commentaire concerne beaucoup
No,
plus
Mr. Jamo, in English, I think will be better for most of us are in English, but maybe one day you speak French. In English will be better if you can.
Okay.
So if you can give us your comments in English, that will be fine. I think Mr. Jamo might be having some internet connectivity issues, but Mr. Jamo, when you come back, please just shoot for your comments.
Yeah,
I saw...
I can hear you. Okay. I think that one key issue that needs to be addressed is Africa lack of preparedness for threat shocks like the current US tariff pressure, and this development, while unfortunate, are not entirely unforeseeable. I think if African government and regional bodies had anticipated such scenarios, we would likely have had a viable alternative of mitigation strategies ready to deploy. Instead, we now find ourselves reacting to external pressure without any immediate or coordinated response, which expose a critical gap in our trade and economic planning. I think that is the problem that we have yet. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Jamo is our national coordinator here at CEPI. Thank you for that, Mr. Jamo. But again, back to our preparedness of shocks and how government and regional bodies interact. It's going to take some time. If we're honest, the African Continental Free Trade Area were lowering tariffs on 90% of goods, but even those 90% of products of tariff lines that were lowering the tariffs on to zero, not all countries are implementing them at the same time. So if you guys give me just 2 minutes to go quickly over what this AfCFTA is, just to refresh us. I know most of us work on this, but we know that there's some countries like Ethiopia that it would take them between 10 to 15 years to phase in the tariffs. Countries like, is it Eritrea or Djibouti that can take them up to 15 years. And then you've got countries like Cameroon and Nigeria, and Cameroon and Ghana, where we're implementing the AfCFTA right now. And after we signed the AfCFTA in June 2018, was it in June or March? In 2018, a few countries came together. So Kenya, Ghana, Cameroon, Tanzania, Rwanda, and one other country, which I forget, 6 of them started trading under the AfCFTA immediately because these countries had already published their tariff schedules well in advance. They created what is called the Guided Trade Initiative. And our issue with the Guided Trade Initiative is that it's helped a lot of businesses export in the continent. But 7 years ago, since we've signed the AfCFTA in Cameroon, only 6 businesses have traded under the AfCFTA, which goes to show that it's not just about signing a huge agreement and having it on paper. We really have to get to the grunt work of making sure that every business that can export knows the step-by-step process to export under the AfCFTA. If you're in Cameroon, for example, you want to export to Nigeria or to Ghana or import from Nigeria or Ghana, the first thing is you ensure that you have your certificate of origin. You ensure that our national regulator has validated your product to ensure that your products are safe and can be consumed by any country in any economy. And then from then on, you have to ensure in Cameroon you contact the CNCC, and they will contact Nigerian authorities and say, next week, Leon, we have a shipment of phones coming. Can you ensure that they apply the 0% tariff under the AfCFTA? Once you have your certificate and your paperwork, you can export tariff-free. But it's different in different countries because in Rwanda, where everything is digitized, you don't need that. All you need are your certificates of origin, and they already automate the tariff line that is applied to your products that you're exporting. So if we really want to make the AfCFTA a reality, and I know most of us here are working on free trade and are working on making it a reality, we have to really take a step-by-step process because it took Europe 10 years for them to even see the benefits of the euro area. 10 years. Was 7 years in Africa since we implemented the AfCFTA, and we have only 6 businesses exporting in Cameroon. In some countries, a few shipments have been done, but I don't think there's any country on the continent where you've had 100 businesses exporting under the AfCFTA. So we really have to accelerate trade under that. Now, Mr. Jamo spoke about the preparedness of trade shocks. If I'm honest, I would like most African countries didn't react. Sometimes it's because we were scared that they will cut off all of the remaining aid that they're giving to us. And sometimes it was because we simply don't trade enough with the United States for us to care. In Cameroon, our policymakers didn't really acknowledge it because it's less than 1% of our trade. So the US is really a non-factor when it comes to that. I don't know whether there's other experiences across Africa. Why did our policymakers not react? Because China told them that they're being irresponsible, and that's why China went tit for tat, even though China has its own problems. But why did Africa not respond? I think it's because we don't have any leverage, and so we should focus on the AfCFTA. Any comments, any contributions, guys? Yes, Mr. Leonard, you have the floor.
I think you said it right. Because the truth of the matter is we don't have any leverage. China responded. No Africa country responded. Not a single one. Or am I mistaken?
Yep, not a single one.
Cameroon
nobody not even issue even a statement to say that we want to negotiate nothing, which is just pure capitulation. And that China's problem was that China said the global South needs to learn to come together and say it's unacceptable. That's the very least they can do. Instead, we've been going behind and we've been going and we're negotiating behind with the United States, trying to disfavor China in some regards. India has already done it, and India is a member of BRICS. So when you have Brazil, Russia, India, China, the major emerging markets in the world, and they cannot stick together, it also sends a message to the United States that Africans and the developing world is not united as we need to be. And we
maybe because we are not United States. That is why we are not united. But anyways, what I will say to that is, it's not a problem that the people, like I said the other time, even the people in power do not care about the policy that is going to implement the economic situation of Africa in the next decade. So now that someone just impose a tariff on them, it's no-brainer. It doesn't concern them really, because I can't say this enough. Most of our African leaders does not get into power because they want to serve. They get into power because they want to serve themselves and their cronies. So this does not really concern them really. But when things like this happen, it does not matter whether you condemn it or you don't condemn it. But what do we do about it? That is the main thing. And I think what, in my own opinion, we should do is to try as much as possible to lower intra-African trade costs. Let me give you an instance. Recently, I was in Ghana. I went to Ghana recently. That was towards the end of last year. And my brother, what my eyes see at the border, it's not funny. Normally, for me to travel from Nigeria to Ghana by road should cost me about 7 hours, 8 hours max. I spent 14 hours on the road. That means 8 minus 14, 6. The remaining 6 I use it at the 3 different borders. To stamp my passport to pass, I have to pay. You are stamping my passport. I have to pay you to stamp my passport. I was like, no, we are not going to pay for these. I'm like, okay, if you are not paying, then stay there. Nobody's going to stamp your passport. And trust, there is nobody that's going to stamp a passport. You say you want to go and report them to the authorities. I'm not going to mention anybody name, any agency name now, but they are there. Guess what? Those authorities that are supposed to uphold the law are waiting for you to even give them their own commission. So you pay all along the way. That's that crazy. So
yes, no, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
When all these things are in motion, when people are trying to bring their products across, even within Africa, all these informal taxes and the formal tariffs in our border is increasing the cost of intra-African trade. If we can, as much as possible, reduce the cost on intra-African trade, trust me, we won't even bother to call for America to come and do anything for us. Because one, we will be able to get everything we need, if not everything, at least 80% of what we need. Investors will come in because they know fully well that if they have their business right in Nigeria, they can ship to any part of Africa without high tariff. They will come in. And when they come in, we won't have to wait for export in the US or whatever other Western world, because the company is here. Why are they coming here to carry our uranium? Why are they coming here to carry our petrol? Why are they coming here to carry our gold, our silver, our diamond, our platinum, our everything? Africa is blessed. We have all the resources. But these people will come in, pick it, take it back, and they will now put higher tariff on us to bring it back in. Come on. When are we going to wake up? So if we can work around intra-African trade, lower the cost, and let people be able to trade with themselves. Because let me even shock you. You know this, Henry, but I don't know if every other person on the call knows. To travel within Africa is way expensive than traveling outside of Africa.
Yes.
Currently, you if you want to book your flight for UK from Nigeria, like 2 months earlier before you fly, you to cost to economy class will cost you about 1.2, 1.3 million. Bro, guess how much it will cost you to go to Uganda from Nigeria the same time? Over $1 million.
Maybe 1.7. Yes, exactly. About 20 or 25% more at the very least. At the very least.
So what are we now doing? For me to travel all the way to UK to US is cheaper than me going to Uganda.
Yep.
Nigeria to Ghana is
cool.
currently about 600,000, which used to be 110, 90,000. We know there is inflation, but there are other things in between that is killing our economy, and that thing needs to be dealt with. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Leon. So, I think the free movement of people, of course, it's indispensable. Because if people cannot move freely, how are we going to make sure that Africans start investing in other countries? Because the first step is is making sure free trade works. Pardon me. The first step is making sure that this free trade works. But the second step is making sure that we are able to generate the investments we need. Because we'll get to the point where we do make free trade work, but can that lead to increased investment? And I see in the comment section, Mrs. Joy Achungo said that we have to start processing our raw materials. But of course, she's mentioned that there are some challenges linked to access to finance and lead, as well as investment, and that our governments have to prioritize their industrial strategies. Our governments, most of them have sustainable development strategies. Most, at least 90% of African governments do. But when you look at our sustainable development strategies, what you find is that the government in the country will say, I want to increase fish production by 60% by 2040. However, the government does not tell you how they're going to do that. Are they going to set X amount of money in each budget to finance that sector? Are they going to find all of the informal producers of fish and group them into one group and scale the production of specific types of fish? So in most of our strategies are just, they're just blueprints. Our governments don't go into detail to say, for example, in Ghana, I'm going in Tanzania, for example, I would go to Arusha and I would take all of the independent and informal sector producers of fish and group maybe 20 in each group that produce a particular type of fish, tilapia or salmon, and then finance them to scale. There is no plan. So what we have to try and do is make sure now that these industrial strategies that they have, either we make sure they update them, or we make sure that the government come up with clear and credible plans for implementation. If they don't have it, then we should create the plans and suggest to them. So I need somebody else. Can someone else? I want us to focus now on the AfCFTA. How do we need to adjust the implementation? Because at the African level, since we signed the AfCFTA, there are 8 protocols. So there's the protocol on goods, the protocol on services, the protocol on digital trade, the protocol on youth and women, the protocol on dispute resolution, and a raft of other ones. At the moment, 7 of those protocols, the protocol on competition and the protocol on investment, 7 out of 8 of the protocols have been agreed at the African Union level. Now, at the country level, what we have to make sure is that when you take the protocol of services, of digital trade, for example, we have to make sure that the policies in our countries are moving towards one direction. When we have a webinar like this and there's a video, in Africa, do we think that the video should be stored in Africa, or do we think that it should be stored in the cloud in the United States? We as Africans, we have to decide, where do we want our data to be stored? Those are the things that's why the protocols of the African Continental Free Trade Area are vital, because they're like pillars. It's like having a house, when people have these story buildings. The African Continental Free Trade Area is the foundation. The pillars that they put before they deck the house, those are the protocols. We have to ensure that the protocols are stable enough to ensure that intra-African trade can flow. So those are the types of things that we have to, as you know, as advocates of free markets, as think tanks, as development advocates, we have to make sure that we are thinking carefully. In property rights, for example, eventually we're going to start issuing digital certificates. If a company comes from India tomorrow, or a company comes from Uganda to Cameroon to come and offer this service, where do we want that company to store their data? We should try and standardize the practice across Africa. If we think that companies should, in South Africa, what they've done is some countries, for example, have started localizing data. Because when you keep, if you say that the data should be stored in your local country, somebody has to be there to ensure that the servers are working properly. And so that creates employment. Maybe that's also a strategy for us Africans to ensure that we have more tech jobs, more jobs that are linked to the ICT sector. So we personally at CEPI, of course, we call for a sensible localization, but I think those are, we have to ensure that whilst we're implementing this AfCFTA, we think of smart ways that will not only create employment, but also keep our data secure. Because ultimately, and that's just one thing, when it comes to financial services, what do we think is the way forward? Please, guys, we need your ideas. How can we make the AfCFTA work better? Because for financial services, if I start a bank in Cameroon, how easy should it be for me to get a license in Nigeria? If I have my capital and it's hosted at the local bank or at the local bank in Cameroon, is it enough for me to just show that I have my capital to operate in Nigeria? Or do we have to ensure that Africa now has a central deposit mechanism where anybody can operate anywhere in Africa, but you just need to prove that you have the funds and transfer some of the funds there, not all of it. Maybe 30% or 40% of the funds are transferred to that account. So that we know that if you're operating in Africa, you do have some capital to pay out money, to give out loans, etc. So those are the things that we really have to think about, like carefully. Mr. Leon, you have the floor.
I am not speaking. I want to put one of my leader who is on the call on the spot.
Okay.
Mr. Eric Kofi from ILEE Ghana is on the call. So Eric, let's hear your opinion about this. Eric is my guy at the top.
Okay, Eric, you have the floor. I see
I'm trying to
Angela.
ask him to unmute.
Okay. I see Angela
Eric,
is here as well.
Please unmute.
Yes, Eric, unmute. You have the floor, guys. Please, let's make this engaging because we have to leave here today, and we need to have like at least a path towards which we're working. I think it's important for us to think about it carefully. So while Eric turns on his mic, on the chat, I see there are about strengthening intra-African trade. Mr. Saka Habib Upeyemi says that Nigeria is not solely the country having problem with exporting raw materials to America and importing finished goods, even Kenya. All of us import mostly commodities, even Cameroon. A lot of it is crude oil. You'll never hear that, and we know that Ghana is manufacturing cars. Some is it Burkina Faso? Who is manufacturing electric vehicles. So, while we're thinking of Elon Musk and Tesla, we have to think of Itaú because Itaú is manufacturing an electric vehicle where all of the parts and all of the materials are sourced in from Africa, mostly from Niger. So we have to ensure that we're putting forward these businesses, but most of Africa's trade with other countries across the world is raw materials. We need to transform a lot more of the things we export. Miss Manis Namalupa is enjoying the presentation from Malawi. Thanks for joining. Mr. Uzuma Hagai wants to know what's the center of today's class. Today we're talking about we're trying to turn tariffs imposed by the US into triumphs. So we've spoken about the impact of US tariffs on African economies, and now we're brainstorming about various ideas that can transform Africa's production and enable us to transition away from commodities towards intermediate and finished goods. Oh, thanks for sending that, Leonard. Improving customs and logistics infrastructure. Okay, Mr. Saka Habib, if you're around, you can take the floor. So, Mr. Leonard, you said one of the points Mr. Leonard spoke about was the fact that most of Africa is already fragmented into 8 regional economic communities. You've got ECOWAS, you've got the Southern African Development Community, you've got the EAC, you've got the Arab Maghreb Union, you've got the CEMAC region. And so the AfCFTA came and said that we're not going to interfere with these regional economic communities, would allow you guys to operate, but you guys should operate in a way that allows the slow eradication and removal of tariffs. That's why African countries finally agreed to it. But one criticism I can say for our regional economic communities is that our regional economic communities have focused a lot on trade. The focus for the Sahel states is focused a lot more on security. But most of the focus has been on trade and not on infrastructure development, which is why the cost of traveling is so high, the cost of trade is very, very elevated. In what we suggest in Central Africa is that every single year at the meeting for the CEMAC heads of states and CEMAC Day recently, and even the United Nations concurs, we don't have to say we have to improve our infrastructure. No. We in Central Africa, we was saying that all of the roads that connect Chad, Central African Republic, Gabon, Cameroon, Congo Republic, and Equatorial Guinea, we need to be grading at least 500 to 1,000 kilometers of regional roads to connect us better. This is because we have a total of about 25,000 kilometers worth of land of roads connecting these 6 countries in Central Africa. And so I encourage us to also move to quantitative targets, because when we do this, it's going to make it easier for us to hold our policymakers to account. So if we're saying that our roads internally in Cameroon, 1,000 kilometers of road should be graded every single year, regional road, at least 500 kilometers. I think if all of us come together and speak with one voice, no matter what happens, they're going to listen. In ECOWAS, there's no reason why it shouldn't be simpler to travel from Nigeria to Ghana or Nigeria to Cote d'Ivoire. It is simple, there are highways. Some people travel for the African Development Bank meetings, but we have to make it seamless and easier. If you have goods going to Nigeria from Ivory Coast, if you have your paperwork in Ivory Coast, you can simply scan that and send that to the Nigerian authorities, so that when the goods are coming, they know the weight, they know the size, they know the types of products. All they need to do is install a small scanning machine and scan it, and the good from Ivory Coast can get into Nigeria. I know that when we say these things, it sounds very theoretical, but it's not. It's simply scanning a piece of paper on one end. That's what they do in Norway, in Sweden. And I know people will say we should not compare ourselves to the West, but I think we should also hold Africa to higher standards. They don't do anything different. They scan a piece of paper that you present with the products that you want to import or export, and they send it to the border authority wherever they are. And when you get there, you're not removing papers to show people. You simply tell them, I'm coming from this place, and this is my reference number, and they can scan and you can get into a market. So I think digitization and improving our logistics infrastructure is definitely a must-have for Africa. Are there any other points?
Yeah, Henry, can you hear me?
Well, I can. I was wondering when you would take the floor. Hello, Angela.
Yeah, thank you very much. So whilst you were calling me to talk, Leo was also calling me, so I couldn't even hear you.
Okay.
So the reason why I was a bit quiet during this call is because you have said it all. This issue of tariffs have shown that we as Africans, we are we have over dependency, like a very high over dependency rates on like US per se. And then, as you said earlier on, there are some things that we need to do as Africans. Now, what I actually wonder sometimes is these African leaders, okay, who are not here to serve as we know, are they even aware of what we call free trade? And if they are aware, why are they not implementing some of these things? Is it because they just want to be wicked leaders or whatnot? We've hosted so many conferences. I have been to one after conference. You see, they host a very nice and lovely conference, talk about solutions, what we can do, but we are not even implementing anything. You don't see anything. I'm
Yes.
bringing a very small solution, a very small experience from my own home country, Ghana. As some of the earlier speakers said, most of Africans export is raw material. Recently in Ghana, our former president, Nana Akufo-Addo, promised to build one factory in every region. Ask me how far. I've not seen any factory. We've not seen any factory. The old ones that were there that he wanted to revive, nothing. So now my problem is, how can we talk about free trade? We are signing agreements here and there, but we as individual countries, we are not even developing our own selves to export these finished goods. I loved Leon's example of iron, how you can, if it's just a raw bar, it costs this. If it turns into a chip, it costs this. How are we individual countries as Africans? How are we developing our own selves? Do we have the infrastructure, the industries, the factories to, turn these raw materials into finished good? Now, aside that, how is our digitalization like? We can sit here and talk about so many solutions, but honestly, I am waiting and relying on some kind of implementations. My question is, as think tanks and organizations helping to educate our fellow citizens, what can we also do? What do we need to do because we can do all the education we want to do, but how are we what's going to be the impact? Now, my problem is we are all leaders of various think tanks. Should we go into politics and then try and because honestly, I'm tired of hearing.
Maybe some people should.
Yeah, I think we should go to our individual parliament houses and then make some of these suggestions, because I feel like they are not even hearing us. Yeah, we can write policy brief after policy brief, press release after press releases, but there is nothing being done. So I also throw a question to my fellow think tank leaders. What should we do as think tank leaders? Or even not the leaders, but even if you're a volunteer and you are here, what can we do to, maximize this? Because this African Free Trade Agreement is a very good thing. If you are able to utilize it very well, if you are able to agree on some of these things, develop our own selves as countries, and then take away some of these bottlenecks and these barriers and whatnot, is going to benefit ourselves. So what can we do as think tank leaders? Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, Mr. Leon, I'll let you, do you have some suggestions? Well, I can share a bit of what we are doing at TEPI, because we're working on trade. The first thing we do is we try and identify businesses that have some potential to export, and then either help them get to that last bit. For example, you can have a business that makes detergent, really good detergent, and they make it and they put it in a normal bottle. But a small training that, a training or even just a session with a graphic designer that creates a small logo for them can drive their business forward. And also the other thing is that we have to teach businesses, what we're doing is teaching businesses how to export step by step, how to import step by step, so that if somebody is buying to resell, they also can. And the point about our leaders listening, I think that, it takes a bit of time. They're a bit strong-headed, but they ultimately do. I think we just have to try and speak as much as we can with one voice. Like if you keep sending the briefs and you keep sending the reports and the policy recommendations, they will respond. So Mr. Okunade John, you have the floor. Well, before Mr. Okunade John takes the floor, Mr. Leonard, 1 or 2 suggestions. How can think tanks like make this free trade a reality?
You see that question, it's a question that we have been talking about for years. I can remember in 2019, that is barely a year after the AfCFTA was signed into agreement. As a matter, we were in Kenya for the African Liberty Forum, and this topic, we actually started on this topic. And guess what? There is little to what we can do. I will use my country, Nigeria, as an example. For you to get into position of power in Nigeria, for those that live in Nigeria, know that there is a process. And even if an angel gets into position of power in Nigeria, he will be corrupt by the time it's done, which it's mostly impossible. What we've been doing in Advocacy of Liberty is, instead of getting into the government, why don't we build an army of people who understand? Because the main problem that I and my team have identified is that it's not as if we don't have a good leaders. We have good leaders. We only have bad systems. So if you say you want to go through this current system to get into the position of power to change it, the system will corrupt you. So the only option that I'm seeing, this is my opinion, the only option I'm seeing is, let's continue to build an army of people, of informed individuals. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Let's continue to build an army of informed individuals. Because a friend of mine used to say something. He said, the more you know, the less you can be controlled. Our people don't know. And when you don't know something, you don't know it. You don't know it's been taken away from you. As we're even talking about this trade war and everything in this system, people don't care. Let's take a random experiment. Go to the field, go to the street, and just ask random people, do you know about the US trade war? They'll tell you, what concern me with US trade, what concern me, am I trading? But they don't know that everything is dependent on this pressure. A simple hike in tariff kills every other thing. Thank God for free markets. In a reality sense in Nigeria right now, Dangote, who is a capitalist, is currently controlling the price. Is currently controlling the price of fuel in Nigeria right now. It used to be NNPC. If NNPC tell us we are buying it at the rate of 1,200, we don't have a choice. But now we have Dangote that say, okay, you want 7,200? Oh no, I'm selling my own for 780. They won't have a choice because now the market now controls. There is competition in the market and it works for everybody. So until we have enough people, it's a game of number. Like they used to say, democracy is a game of number. These that we are talking to, it's a game of number. The only thing we as think tank leaders and think tank volunteers can do is make sure people understand what we already understand. Recently, I was in the UK and I was talking to a fellow Nigerian who has been in the UK for a whole lot of years. And the question he asked me, it was, Leon, what are you still doing in that country? He's a Nigerian. But he told me, what am I doing in that country? That Nigeria is hopeless. But do I feel that Nigeria is hopeless sometimes? Yes. But am I going to give up on Nigeria because it's hopeless? I have what it takes to carry myself and my family out of this country. If we want to go, we can go. But do I want to go? No.
Exactly. No, we don't.
I don't want to go because every other place is saturated. Africa is still very, very much. It's like what Jesus said when Jesus was talking to. He said the land is fertile. Send the master worker to send worker into his harvest. According to those that are not Christians, Nigeria is fertile, ready to be harvested, but it depends on us, and that is why we started the Free Market Fellowship. Henry, you were in Tanzania last year when I was giving my presentation. The main reason why we started this program, the Free Market Fellowship that we are currently doing at Face of Liberty, is because we noticed that a number of the only people that can teach and preach, as it were, the free market principle that makes the Western world better than Nigeria are not more than 20 in Africa that can teach, in Nigeria, that can teach us correctly. In the whole of Africa, we are not up to 1,000. Just imagine 1,000 as against 1.4 billion Africans. Do the maths. 20 in Nigeria, and we are being generous. 20 in Nigeria as against 218 million people on paper. How are we not going to be the poverty center of the world? So, as think tank leaders, what I believe, as think tank volunteers, or as future think tank founders, leaders that are on the top, what we can do is basically keep building that army of knowledgeable individuals. Let them see what they are missing. When you know something is being taken away from you, you will stand up and want to get it back. Merci beaucoup.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Leonard. So, Mr. Okunade John, you have the floor. Mr. John, you have the floor. Okay, well,
all right, good evening, everybody.
Unmute. Good evening.
Oh, please, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, it's very wonderful opportunity this evening, and I'll be following the comment actually. I think it's high time before we leave, because I feel like most times just like I said, it's like everybody has passed the comment earlier on.
Is it just me, or can we all hear Mr. Okunade properly?
That we can educate or inform. Sorry, can you hear me? Okay, I think my network is breaking. I'm sorry. So what I was trying to say is that our approach to this issue can be multifaceted, in the sense that we can try to raise an army of people who are not just educated but also informed. They're informed about what is really going on, about and things we can do to remedy the situation. And then after that, from raising an army of informed people, then we can, because knowledge is power, then we can see those who will be powerful enough to go into political positions or political spaces to create a change, or to create disruptions, to create positive changes in these systems that we are complaining about. So that's just my brief insight on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. So we have to educate and inform, and then we have to try and see who we can insert into politics. Right. You know that as free market think tanks, most of us, some of us have like a contempt for the state. So politics, I know off the bat, is more of a tool for us. The way I think politics can be leveraged in two ways. What we try to do is we at the Cameroon Economic Policy Institute, when we complete a policy brief, we identify the 2 or 3 people in a ministry that can impact that particular thing. So we don't send it to 25 people just off the bat. And I think with politics, you can also make sure that you find the people who are the right people. Like our free market fellowship it's not yet done wide broadly because we don't have the resources to manage it as we would like. And what we're doing is we're identifying people in the public sector, people in government who work with CEPI as fellows, and we coach them and teach them why the free market system might be beneficial in some instances versus others. And to this day, it makes our recommendations a bit more impactful. So what I can suggest for think tanks across the continent is that we have to see politicians as our friends. But I think the most important thing for us is to identify when a particular issue can change. In our speak, you call it the overturn window. If you identify when an issue can change, like the AfCFTA, for example, we know it's a hot topic now in Cameroon. Government, some people in government are talking about it. The UN, the World Bank are all talking about the AfCFTA and how to seize the opportunity. So what we did is we identified all of the key people who are implementing it, and just send them your report, send them your recommendation, ask for an informal meeting. You don't always have to go, if they don't want you to take a picture, don't. Just make sure that you're engaging with them and getting them to bring about that change. Right now, we're working with the Ladies Network for Economic Freedom. What we're going to do is the same approach. We identify the people, you send it to them, and our job is to create as many advocates as possible. But I also want us to be realistic that the AfCFTA there can only be momentum across Africa if we here today have a very clear plan about what we want for Africa. Because yes, some of us we won't get into government or run for office tomorrow. But I think there's ways that we can leverage politics that can allow us to achieve our objectives. So my one advice is that just find the local politicians and engage them, and make sure that before we complain about an issue, for example, we cannot just complain about the AfCFTA anymore, because the people who are implementing it were speaking to them on a weekly, monthly basis. So when we suggest something to them, they say, oh, this has actually been scheduled, like create a platform where people can go and find all the information for the AfCFTA. They tell us this is already in works. We hope to launch 2 years from now. It's in our work plan. Look, this was, agreed at this time. Then we know that when we get to that date, if it's not done, then we'll have to make sure that they get it done. So it's also making sure that you identify the people who are most impacted and then reach out to them. Yes, Miss Angela, Madam Angela, you have the floor.
Yeah, Henry, thank you very much. So, as my brother Leo was talking, something just struck. You said you're talking to a fellow Nigerian in the UK. So growing up, we had these rumors that China is China because Chinese government sent students out to US, UK to learn their ways, and then they come back to the country to give back to the country. How is our case here in Africa?
Oh, Angela.
I know of Henry. No,
I mean, that's not what happened, but go on. That's not what happened, but go on.
I know that's not what happened, but the thing is, there are people I know of personally, okay, that were sent to US or UK or whatever on government scholarships to learn. When they get there, they are saying is, wow, why am I come back to Ghana to do what?
Okay.
And there are more people like that. They get the chance, they leave the country, they go and learn the amazing things they're supposed to learn, and then they just keep it there. They don't come back to their country to invest in the country. And it's a big issue, but we'll talk about that some other time. Now,
okay.
I like
before you
the
go, so
idea
I'm noting it down. I'm just noting it down. So the first thing is brain drain. People go and they don't come back, and then so that's one of the issues?
Yeah, so one of the solution is people have to come back and come and reinvest in their homeland. Okay,
Okay.
so moving on, you talked about government being our friends.
Yes. No, not our friends, but I'm
Honestly,
saying not our friends. They're not our friends.
oh
We're
no,
not
no,
there to
no. I
fraternize
get,
with them. But we have to
yeah, yeah.
identify the ones who are interested. For example,
Honestly,
in
I
a whole
get
institution.
your point,
A
okay.
point. Okay.
And as you are speaking, I just keep asking, is Cameroon in Africa?
Yes,
Because
Cameroon
it
is in
seems
Africa.
like, oh no, I know, but I'm just being sarcastic. It seems like you guys are not having some of our African trade too. Because
Oh, we
here
are.
in Ghana, let me give you an example. So last year I tried to create this project, Liberty at Grassroots, where we educate young girls in schools about liberty, and then we form clubs to help them, to empower them, and then educate them about free market trade and liberty and a whole lot. Now, when I was looking for space in the government schools, okay, Henry, that small interaction, it really drained me, if I'm being honest. You have
Yes.
to go to the school. Honestly, I thought, oh, going to the school would be easy, speak to the headmaster, and then, get their permission and then come to the school. I got to find out that you have to go to the district office to get a permission from them and then come back to the school. I got to the district office. I was now directed to go to the district office, the Department of Education aspect of the district office, to get a letter from them and then go back to the school.
Yes.
No wahala, it's all good. At least it will help to, manage
More
bad
people, yes,
influences coming to the
more
school.
people
So
will
I
get
was
to
okay.
like know you.
I was okay now. Now my problem is, imagine you being in your office as a district officer or whatever, and then this young lady is in front of you asking that this is what she wants to do in some of these schools to improve our education. And I have to pay registration fee, no problem. Now I have to go and sort the director, the deputy director. I have to go and sort the HR who is going to. I'm like, hey. So before I will even come and implement my project, the money that I've taken from Atlas, that I'll go and make account from, I've already sought about 3 or 4 people. And these are people who are government officials. Yes, there are good people in there who are going to, listen to you and then take your advice and whatnot. But it is a big work. Just as Leo was giving his example, before he moved from Nigeria to Ghana, see the wahala he went through at the how
At
do
the
you put it,
border,
at the border.
at the
So
customs officials, yeah.
as I was saying earlier, are you sure Cameroon is in Africa? Because you both don't have our trade too.
No, so okay, so I know what you're saying, Angela, but it's not all been easy. I can share there's many government, there's many policymakers that we've invited who initially say yes and they don't come. There's many, like actually the national coordinator for the African Continental Free Trade Area here at the
Yeah.
Ministry of Finance, not the coordinator at the port, because in Cameroon there's 2 coordinators. The one at the Ministry of Finance doesn't even want to see us. We have sent reports and policy briefs since we exist, and some of them would ignore you because we're not big enough. We don't have money to organize panel discussions in very cushy hotels, but that's
Yeah.
fine. What we try and do is when I go and he's not there, I go to another colleague and I'm like, oh, who is working on this issue? Can I speak to someone? Sometimes they'll send you directly to the head of research. Sometimes they'll send you to the director of internal trade. Sometimes the director of external trade. But even if you don't, so we face these difficulties are everywhere. Maybe I've painted out the picture as though we're like, we're only speaking to the policymakers, but no. But
Okay.
most at times the policymakers tell us no. Parliament, for example, before we spoke to one person in Parliament a few weeks ago, it's taken us 2.5 years of sending
Oh,
reports and
those people,
policy
they are
briefs.
unreachable. No worry.
Yes, we've sent policy briefs for the last 2 years to all
Sorry
the
to cut you,
committees.
but one
So
thing I'll
it's
also suggest is,
yeah,
as we have come today to talk about this African Free Trade Agreement,
yeah,
we are doing so as a united front, as African Liberty Network. I will encourage that after this discussion, I think there's our official launch, Leo. After this discussion, as we have all submitted our great ideas and solutions and suggestions, I would pray and hope that we would all come together and then support each other. Honestly, when I saw Leo's free trade fellowship, I was honestly happy. I even asked him, when is he coming to Ghana, trying to get details. I would be glad to partner with him or host him when he gets to Ghana, because we really need more advocates. I will add, Leo, please, if you are arranging your topics for next year, please add politics to it. We have to empower our advocates and then position
oh
some of
God,
them
I
in
hate
parliament. We need that. Thank you very much.
Right. Thanks very much for the contribution, Angela. Okay, so we are 7:53, Leo. I think we've gone just a bit over time, if I'm not mistaken. I you're
We have till 8:15.
okay. Well, in that case, we have a bit of time. So what I think we have to, maybe our next session should be a bit more about advocacy. Obviously, it's difficult for us as think tanks because they don't know us and they're skeptical about us. Sometimes they even think that we have an agenda. So I think that's why I think if we speak with one voice, and for us that has been our problem, that most people look at us and they say that, oh, these people, where are you people from, who is making you guys do this? So I think one of the things that we have to do, and that we're striving to do with the Africa Liberty Network, is that we have to make sure that we're speaking with one voice over time. I think it's something that will develop over time, but I think for the AfCFTA, what we can do is maybe just start suggesting like the practical things that we can do. Because if we go to every single port authority and say that they have to make sure that the tariff schedules are on software, so that when somebody's product comes, there's no paperwork and they use the software to trade with the product. If we do that across the continent consistently, I promise you guys, 10 years from now, no matter where they are or who they are, they're going to hear it. So I think this is obviously the start, but we should think also about how we can come together to get things done at the African level. Now, are there any other comments, suggestions, contributions? I see in the comments was still about the schools. It's a common problem in Africa. You go to a school or a private institution, they want you to give them some money before you speak to the students. Well, I think sometimes some institutions will want you to do that, but sometimes you'll be lucky that you meet an institution and they tell you, "Can you guys come next week? Can you guys come every month?" So I think
No,
it's just
those
it's like hit or
institutions
miss.
are the private institutions. Those people
Yes.
are, there is no problem. I remember our second phase of the project. We didn't even do it anywhere in Accra. We went to one of the villages in the eastern region, and the proprietor or the
Okay.
headmaster he kept asking, "So Angie, when are you coming back? Please don't leave us alone. Oh, you have to come back. Oh, we're waiting for you. Oh." But do you know that this story is funny? When I wanted
The
to get
logistic.
to the to find out how the program went, especially getting back to the government school, I had I had the opportunity to get one of the contacts of the teachers to help facilitate the club. And now when I went there, the lady was like, I should go back to the district office and get another entry into the school. So when I went back, the lady was like, oh, the reason why she said that is because she thought I was bringing something to the school. So it's like, if I want to bring something to the school, I still have to go through the district office. I don't know if they still want another share or what. So as for this
Okay.
problem, it's a huge mess. But we'll see
Well,
what
okay.
we'll do.
No, it's good. I mean, we have to try, right? It's true that now that you're going through that process, nobody sees the difficult part. But tomorrow, everybody only sees what you put on LinkedIn or Facebook. When you've trained 1,000 people, that's the part that people see. But nobody sees like the hard work
Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
goes
That's
behind.
that's true. That's true.
But like I encourage all of us, it's not easy. I promise you guys, sometimes when you distributed, ask for audiences to 100 people and 2 people respond, it's not easy, but we have to I think it's
One of
much
the
more of
problems with events is
persistence.
you send registration forms 1 month, 2 weeks prior to the program, and you get about 100 responses the day of the actual event. 5 people are showing up. Just five out of the 100 response, you just get five, and you
Right.
wonder. So why are these people who are responding? Are they ghosts?
So like I get what you're saying. But yes, Leonard, maybe some tips. Give us some tips for that. These are like practical issues that we face.
I'm going to give 2 examples here. Our very first event in Lagos, we had 160 applications, 82 people confirmed, but guess how many people showed up on the day of the event?
20.
15.
2. 1 and 2.
Wait, including you and your team, or?
No, 2 external people.
Okay.
All the speakers, we have 4 speakers. The 4 speakers came. Myself and our CFO was there, and 2 extra people. From 160 people, 82 confirmed. We prepared for 40. What's come to what? That is preparation, the food, the drinks, everything. We turned to Father Christmas. So that day, it taught us one thing. You don't prepare until you see people come around. It's as simple as that. Because this is donors' money, you don't just waste it. That's number 1. 2, this discussion this night, do you know how many registration we got? We are just 21 on this call right now. We got, if I'm not mistaken, let me check. Okay. We got 128 registration. And how many are we? 21. I sent the link out to about 2,000 emails. Out of the 2,000 emails, about 1,200 read it. The number that registered, but see what we have here. So when it comes to practicality of event, I know for the fellows, for other people that are out there trying to see how to get into the non-profit world, non-profit management, founding a think tank and the likes, it is not easy.
It's not.
And that is the main reason why I keep saying, until we make sure that we understand the nitty-gritty of why we are here. And Henry, please permit me to say this. The main reason why people don't understand where we are is because they don't travel.
You sound like me.
Travel.
Very true. This is 100% fact.
You sound
when
like
you
me.
travel, trust me, your perception will change. I was in the UK and I've traveled all across Africa to a larger extent, glory be to God. I've been trying to get to the UK. I was not able to get to the UK because they keep doing nonsense. Now they finally approved. I went to the UK. I spent 3 months. I told my wife, babe, I'm going to the UK for 3 months. Can you stay by yourself? Because I need to go and learn what makes the UK great. Because UK is the new Nigeria for Nigeria. It's where all of them are watching too.
I wouldn't go as far as calling it great, but okay.
So I thought I want to go into the UK and learn what makes UK great. What the people is running there. Bro, I went in. UK is great, but it's not a country I can live. It's a country I can go on vacation and return back. It's a country I can make business in and return back. Because it is not as great as it were, but it is working. Why? because they've accepted what we fail to accept in Africa. I'm not going to say it is too much or they are older than us when it comes to independence. I know they are obviously they are the ones that came to colonize us. So they don't even want no dictator, as it were, wants his servants to get out. They don't give us the real thing that makes them successful. And now that we have traveled and seen new, when you come out and tell our people here, it's as if you are speaking gibberish because they don't understand. And that is why we need to keep talking about it, shouting about it on the rooftop until people understand it. Because running a think tank, people think it's easy. Okay, before we come on this call, I and Henry, before everybody joined, I and Henry was talking about Africa of Liberty recently got a matching grant offer from Atlas Network, a $5,000 matching grant offer. This is something that is supposed to be easier for us to raise. For crying out loud, Nigeria, how much is $5,000? Just 7.5 million. Only one person can give you that money. But the problem is, you need to look at the people that wants to give you that money. Because most of the people that have that money and will want to give you that money have an agenda. And if you just take that money from them, the agenda goes into your mission is void. So now you are seeing free money and you cannot take it. And the ones that don't have agenda behind the money that they want to give you, they are not ready to give you. Why? Because they don't see any sense in what you're doing. These are the people that you are going to call for event. On the day of your event, they will tell you, sorry, is today the event? This is someone that you have been messaging, sending to, calling us, everything. It's crazy. But one thing I know is we'll keep pushing.
Well,
as individuals, and as collective organization as ALN, and hopefully, just hopefully, we will see the greater impact in the near future.
Indeed. So, persistence is key. I think we just have to stay persistent. And I think our why is very important. Today, we've seen that it's not just about US tariffs. It's about what can Africa do for itself. In your local community, if you see someone simply plying wood, can they transform that somehow? Can they gain more value from that? We have to ensure that our businesses, wherever they are, whoever they are, we have to bring them together. We have to make sure that it's one day at a time, one person at a time. We don't have the resources to transform the lives of 1,000 people at once. But if each year your organization is reaching 2 entrepreneurs and you're helping them function properly, then you're achieving some change, no matter how small it is. So I would like to thank each and every one of us for taking the time. I encourage us all to please follow the Africa Liberty Network on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Stay up to date with our events. And if you have any questions whatsoever, if you're the leader of a think tank somewhere, don't hesitate to reach out to us, because together we can go further. So the recommendations, we've spoken about quite a few points. The Africa Liberty Network, of course, we're going to be producing a short article with the recommendations and useful cases of good implementation of the AfCFTA across the continent, and tying that back to tariffs. And we will be sharing that with you guys at our earliest convenience. So now that we only have 2 minutes, Mr. Leonard, give us some official closing remarks.
All right, thank you very much, Henry, and every other person that joined this call today. It's an amazing time. This is our first ever roundtable discussion, and it is going to continue. We're just starting out. Even ALN is not officially launched. This is like a test in the water, and we have 20 people on the call for the stretch of 2 hours. It's amazing. It's amazing. Our main objective is to make sure that when we want to do a roundtable like this, we have at least 200 people to listen, to understand, to get involved. to get informed, because right now, what we are trying to do is make to us to have informed citizens. Thank you very much for joining us today. And there's one thing I love doing during our calls for people that know me very well. For those who can turn on their videos, I will so much appreciate if you can turn on your video and just wave at us. I want to record a bit of just a small recording, video recording, then we will add that to our social media platform. So, yeah, basically, all you have to do is turn on your video and wave. The call is currently recorded. If you can turn on your camera, for those that can. Oh, Yasha, nice seeing your face. Angela, Joy.
Nice seeing you, Ahmed.
So nice to see everyone. Right. Okay.
So thank you very much. And next month, the last Friday of every month is going to be our roundtable discussions. And I can't wait for the next discussion that we're going to be bringing upon. Just know, the feedback from what we have today is what we are going to build to bring the next one. You are the ones deciding where this discussion goes. So until the last Friday of June from Nigeria, good night.
Good night, everyone. Have a good week.